Hi, I'm Tom Henschel.
I'm Sonia Jante.
And I'm Kimberly Lane. Together, we're unlocking leadership. We are three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take a question from a real client and provide key insights to address the challenges from our three different perspectives. It's a holistic approach to understanding challenges and opportunities. Let's get to it. Our first question comes from Jason in Santa Monica. Jason writes, I'm a vice president in my company, and we just got acquired by another organization. We know nothing about their culture or their values. Are there tips for understanding the new organizational culture? And if their values are very different than my own and my own current organization, should I even stay? Tom, I think this is a good one for you to start with.
Okay. Jason, I hear you have two questions. One is about culture and one is about your career. I want to start with the culture one first. We can cover both, but let me just start with the culture one. It's likely that their values will be different. I want to suggest to you that you have two things to do. Number one is pay attention. Things are going to happen and pay attention to them. You could even keep a log if you want to. It's not a complaint log. It's a reflection log. Like, what's going on around me? But here's the second thing you need to do. Take your time. You don't know yet you don't know what anything means yet. So will things be different? Yeah, but what do they mean? We don't know. So here's a thought to keep in mind. This is like getting dropped down in a foreign country. The currency is different. The language is different. How you turn on the lights is different. Where you go to the market, everything is different. It is not better or worse. It's just different. And if you stayed long enough, you might like it. So there's a thought to get us started. Who wants to take number two?
I think I'll build on what Tom just said. I agree that you can't jump to conclusions, but there is a mindset based on what he just said about being in a foreign country is stay curious. When you're in a foreign country, you don't immediately jump to conclusions that eating at 9 o'clock at night is bad, if that's the culture of the company, if that's the culture of that country. So one of the things that I find interesting today that we didn't have a while back is there's a lot of information on the internet that one can look up. Organizations tend to have websites, and they tend to have information about their culture, their values, their history. And I think that's a good place to start in trying to understand. So make sure that your mindset is about being curious, and what you're doing is you're seeking understanding. Then once the organizations start meshing together, you can also be a contributor to creating the forum or the dialogue for learning more about each other. I worked in a company, I worked as a coach in an organization in which they were moving leaders from one particular division to another division. And one of the things that HR did was to facilitate the onboarding of the new executive with the team was they had the new executive come into a room with all the members of the new team. And it was an open forum for them to ask any questions they wanted of that executive. So it allowed for them to get, if you will, an in-person, on the ground information about the new leader or the new situation. So be curious, seek to understand, and facilitate anything that you can that helps build more information.
Excellent. And I've got a couple thoughts around that too, kind of building on what both of you have commented on. Yes, from a research perspective, there's a plethora of information, and we have the advantage, obviously, of looking at their company culture from what you can get from their website. I'd also encourage you to look at their leadership team on LinkedIn. You can see by any articles they post, what organizations they belong to from a business perspective, or even otherwise, charities they support or not, education. All these will give you a really good clue as far as kind of getting a good perception and possible understanding of what the culture is going to be. Secondly, you mentioned you're a vice president, so maybe you weren't in the initial conversations for the acquisition, but I'm sure if you have relationships with higher up, this is the time I would totally capitalize on those relationships. And maybe you can have a side conversation with maybe the CFO, even maybe your superior, as far as possibly asking what they feel that culture is going to be. Why did they allow this organization to acquire your company? What is the long-term goal of that? If they can give you any kind of insight, I think that's an additional way to go. And kind of building also on what Sonia mentioned, why don't you become part of the solution, right? Perhaps you can volunteer to lead a task force to help assimilate the two organizations together, or at least create a opportunity for your immediate team and department to have an open forum to discuss what concerns they have moving forward with the cultures, possibly how you can merge the two together in your particular department and division. And then also, as Sonia talked about, just, maybe there's an opportunity for one of the new executives to come in and give a commentary and give some insight as to how they are seeing the culture to be established. So those are my initial thoughts on the whole kind of culture piece. On the secondary piece, you talked about what happens if their values don't match yours. So I would kind of do what Tom already talked about, is maybe do a pros and cons list, or just what are the pieces of the culture today of your organization that you see and that you like, and what ones mirror your values of your organization, values of you personally. Where is there alignment? Where is there not alignment? Are there opportunities where you'd like to see something different? And then third, based on your research from LinkedIn and even looking up the company information, kind of make a strong guess as far as what you feel that new culture is going to be with a new organization. And from there, you kind of start having a vision proactively of what might materialize. And then, as Sonia mentioned, stay curious, be aware, ask questions, and look to see what unfolds with open eyes. As Tom had mentioned, I don't think it's good to make quick judgment without really giving the opportunity to things to flow through. And that could take easily 6 months or possibly even a year. But being aware, being curious, and also being reflective upon yourself. Is this aligning with what you want to be doing, who you are, and your values as well, is extremely important. Okay, I'll turn it back to one of you.
This is when I love that we have different perspectives, because I see this a little differently, this career part. So, Jason, I don't know what you think about your own career at the moment. Like, you're saying to us, should you stay or should you go? How could we possibly know, right? Mm-hmm. But I think even if you build pros and cons lists and all that, I don't think these choices are ever really binary. The piece that I'd like to plug in for you, I'd like to add to whatever it is you're thinking about, is to think of your career as having a big, long arc, and you're at a certain point in your career. Mm-hmm. I would encourage you to get an advisory board. Not people who are going to go, "Oh, Jason, don't leave your job. Oh my God." Not though, but somebody who can listen and somebody who can be supportive, or to really think about the discipline of a career coach. I don't know about Sonia and Kimberly. I certainly have people I could refer you to. People who do career coaching, like the three of us who have our specialties, those people are amazing, not to help you find your next job, but to help you think about your career. Even if you don't move for 3 years, then it won't be a fire drill when the time comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Tom that you really have to you have to know what it is that you want out of your career. I think one of the challenges that we have often when we start our career is being in the right seat, being in the role that we really were meant to do and we're really meant to be. And so it's very, when we have that, we tend to perform at our best and we tend to make great contributions. And so organizations recognize us and we then get to be part of the conversation. The other thing that I want to just mention is we are living in times of tremendous change. And I would say that there's no organization that isn't looking at how to create better employee engagement, how to really look at creating psychological safety, all kinds of things that before might have been nice to haves, but they're moving into the front and center part of what organizations are looking at. So I think that there is the possibility that whatever values the organization may have had that potentially are conflicting in creating engagement and safety in these kinds of times, they probably are being reevaluated. So, again, don't jump into any conclusions about, where you should be, but it's important for you to have a clear understanding of where your strengths are, what you really get to, what you really enjoy doing. One of my statements that I often make to executives when I find they get very frustrated is I go, how are you taking score? How do you measure that you had a good day? How do you measure that you had a good week? How do you measure that you had a good year? That tells me volumes about how it is that you are either in the right seat or you're looking at the right things in order to be able to both monitor them and affect them.
I'm going to push back. I feel, granted, you need to know where you're going from a career perspective, and that's important. Maybe, Jason, you want to be the nice and, a senior vice president. That's awesome. And I think a career coach can totally help you with that. But if the organization isn't aligned with your values and who you are, and you're going to feel disgruntled, you're going to feel frustrated, you're not going to feel supported, you're going to be having conversations with others in a room, and you're just not going to feel like they hear you and it resonates. And that's going to be a disalignment that I don't think you're going to excel in that environment. So I really think having a knowledge base of really what's important to you. Maybe this new organization comes in and they're not green. Maybe they don't have a higher charity that they support to donate to pets or children's hospitals, and your current organization did. And maybe that's really important to you. And knowing too, with millennials coming to the workforce, that's really important. So if it's kind of like you buy a house and, you're the homemaker, or this is probably a really poor example, but this first comes to mind, it's your home, it's your nest. That's where you're going to flourish. That's where you can relax. That's where you find peace. That's where you can be candid, that you can be truly yourself. And you need to be able to flourish in your work environment now more than ever. And that whole culture piece, I hope and that they will bring in that belonging, that community, and that inclusivity engagement. But, that has to be there because it has to allow you to flourish too, whatever your career goals are, right?
I love this. This is great. So I have a thought here. So ultimately, this is going to be about people. I think whatever's on the website, whatever's on LinkedIn, whatever you read is one thing, but ultimately it's going to be about behaviors. And I want to tell you, Jason, I do an exercise with teams that is about trying to move values from the written page, the way they're stated, into actual behavior. Like, how are we going to manifest respect or whatever it is? That's hard. So look, this company could say whatever they have to say on their website about their values. You have no idea what that's going to look like. And especially with your boss, if you get a new boss, or you just don't know what it's going to look like yet. So again, I want to encourage patience and some sense of distance and objectivity. Take your time. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic.
So
Yeah,
there's, oh,
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a lot of people resigning from their organizations now as it is because of people are valuing the sense of be able to have a hybrid culture, to work from home, have more balance in their life. So, it's going to be difficult to find great talent, but you don't want to jump quickly. I just think, have some patience, be very reflective, be curious, as Sonia mentioned, and just really, evaluate the situation and don't rush to any conclusions. Go ahead, Sonia.
So there's one last thing I want to share with Jason, and that is when I first started in my career as a coach, I got an advice from a leader that I respect very much. And he said, if you want to understand the culture of a company, ask them, what happens in a crisis? Because whatever happens in a crisis, you really understand the power structure, how they really go out and implement things. Now, we've been living through quite a few crises. So you probably have a sense of how your organization operates in a crisis. And you can compare that to how it is that you thought that they were going to operate based on the values that you've been living with, however long you've been there. So I want to give you that as additional context to think about.
And kind of what they're going through is kind of a crisis because they don't know what's going to happen. And uncertainty breeds, we all think of the worst case scenario. That's just a natural default of our brain. We go to the worst case scenario. So I would expect that your leadership, your CEOs of the world are going, if they have not already, starting to communicate what's going to transpire once this deal goes through. And and they should be communicating what's going to be happening from jobs perspective. Are people interviewing for their jobs? Is everybody safe? But an open forum for people to ask questions, because everybody's going to assume the worst, which is not very good for productivity, let alone engagement, right? So
I want to observe that I hear a theme in several of our episodes where we end up talking about change, right?
mhm.
Because that's really suddenly what we're ending this on with Jason is you're in change. And that's like, sometimes whatever it is, it's change. It can be stressful. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jason from Santa Monica, for your question today. We hope our viewers and our listeners gain new insights on understanding a new organization's culture and values. To our listeners, if you liked our content we shared today, please like this episode and also share and subscribe on our YouTube channel, Ask the Coaches, Unlocking Leadership, Ask the Coaches. If you have a leadership question or you would like to reach out to our coaches, please, you'll have our contact information in the show notes as well as our website. Thank you for joining us today. Tune in next time to find the keys to unlock your best leadership.